Welcome to Intelligent Human Leadership, leading yourself and your team. Do you ever find yourself grappling with a lack of confidence in your team? Or battling the relentless waves of concern and fear? Are the pressures to meet client expectations and the burden of missed opportunities weighing you down? On this podcast, you'll discover the strategies and insights that will reignite your team's morale and help you find the harmony and knowledge you seek to propel your business forward. Here, we explore innovative ways to reignite your creative spirit and achieve greatness, empowering you to lead with intelligence, compassion, and resilience. If you're ready to dive deep into your core of leadership challenges and be guided toward success, here's your host, founder of Steward Your Business, David Carr.
Welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast once again. I'm excited to talk with you today and share a story, a journey that I was just on. And I'm sharing this podcast a little later than I normally do because I was gone on a trip down to Mexico over this past weekend. And I thought, when I come to share the podcast episode with you week after week, I want to come from a place of living what I share, what I've learned along my journey. You guys have heard me share many stories in the past episodes, but I had a conversation with a client today. In one of the tools and the frameworks we use is called 5 Gears. And if you haven't heard that before, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, I'll throw up the book here. But the 5 Gears is a practical way of being present and productive when we never seem to have enough time. And we're always feeling like we're running from one thing to the next thing. And what I would say is living a life of default rather than design, not leaving enough margin in our lives, not just just unfortunately letting things just hit us and getting into gear, if you will, where we maybe naturally have a tendency to go based on our voice order. For those of you that are familiar with, maybe have heard me talk about the 5 voices. If you haven't, stay tuned. I'll go deeper on this episode. But there's a challenge we all face in transition and ways of living our lives in which, if we're not aware, we may be unconsciously undermining the life that we truly want to lead. And I had a great conversation with a client today where we were going through and really looking at her life and saying, okay, what does this look like for me? Am I living the life that I truly want of design, or am I living a life by letting things just kind of happen to me and not living in deep purpose, peace, having clear objectives of where you want to go? And that's what this podcast is about. It's about equipping, and it's about informing, but really it's taking knowledge and transforming it into wisdom. It's transforming you from the inside out. So I hope you're going to enjoy this podcast episode as I give you a snapshot into just a recent experience I had taking my son down to Mexico. Here I'm in California, about 2.5 hours or so from the Mexico border, traveling to Tijuana and Rosarito and experiencing the culture, the community, the people of Mexico, which I haven't been able to do in quite some time, and in a way of giving back, coming from a place of abundance, because you've heard me talk about that in past episodes, coming from a place where you have the ability to be a blessing to others. We're all blessed in some level or form or fashion. But I particularly feel the weight or responsibility of, if I've been given great opportunity, great resources, that I should be blessing and giving back. The whole point of being a steward is that you're taking care of the things that have been entrusted to you for whatever time that you have to be a blessing. And so this idea of living intentionally and using this tool as a framework has been super powerful and moving people from being asleep perhaps to their life and the way they're living, to to an awakening, and to ultimately living a life of design, being very purposeful in the way that you spend your time on a daily, weekly, monthly basis and beyond. Because here's the thing, we live life intentionally, we are going to have much more impact and influence on those that we really love and make this world better than just allowing things to come and hit us. I'm going to be 51 this week. So my birthday is coming up here, and I'm grateful for the years I have. I'm also very aware that things can change drastically. I mentioned this on the last podcast. I had a high school friend of mine, same age, just recently passed away from a stroke. My own mom passed away at age 55 from breast cancer. So we don't know how much time that we have been given, but let's make sure that we make the most of the time that we have and be that most intelligent human leader. So I want to jump into this framework for you today on the podcast and give you, for those of you that don't drive a car or haven't drive a car or drive a manual car, I should say, because manuals are kind of disappearing in today's world. But generally speaking, our gears are shifting, right? Even on an automatic car, where we're shifting gears. And so we use this framework, and I'm going to go over real briefly because I've talked about this in previous episodes, but I want to show you how it can be applied in your life and use my life as an example to hopefully encourage you to reflect and see how are you doing that in your own life. Fifth gear is our focused gear. So that's why you're fully, when you're going fast, you're diving in, you don't have a lot of room for error. You're really going deep. And that's focus work. And then we can shift into fourth gear, which is multitasking, or I say multitasking, but just tasking in general. You really can't truly multitask, but you can move between tasks, and there's a lot of them. Third gear is being more socially oriented. Second gear, really diving deeper in connection and presence with others. And first gear being that place to be able to recharge, personal recharge. And so that's an example of the gears, and think of those. And the last gear is reverse, where we have to apologize, recognize where we were off course, and we got to back up there, right? And so how do we apply these things? Because I want to really help you apply and be aware of these things. As I was talking to this client today, we were talking about how she gets stuck in fourth gear, and that's doing a lot of different tasks and really didn't get to have time for be present and being social and maybe getting that recharge that she needed. And so as I spent the last 4 days in Mexico, I wasn't for a holiday. It was actually for a way to give back and serve others that were in need. And so this started, quite honestly, months ago, in preparing. And so fifth gear is really setting time, focusing. We would have, we would have some meetings, scheduling, logistics, packing, preparing, getting our passport in place, right? These are not things that we can just do like quickly. Oftentimes they do take time. They do take some coordination, and it's more than just a quick little task. It's planning. It's looking at all these things. We had to do health checks, other elements, and so we couldn't go on this trip if we didn't spend the time in the fifth gear, preparing for this and being ready to go for what is to come. And so, not that it had to take, days and days and days, but it was of concentrated time where I had to come together, look at these things. And the way it was set up in this particular instance, we were going with a group that we support called Serre la Luz. You can look them up. They're a great organization. It helps the men and women and children in Mexico. But we participated in multiple meetings and events over the courses of several months, preparing and asking questions. And for myself and my son, we hadn't done this together and hadn't been to Mexico. My son has never been to Mexico. I've been to Mexico, but it had been many, many years. So there was just a lot of nuances and things to be prepared for. Of course, along the journey, we had lots of different things to do. and that's all part of it. We had multiple areas that we were going to, multiple groups that we were speaking with and coordinating with. I've been spending time over the last couple months, for example. Goes back to fifth gear a little bit, but using the app Duolingo, for those of you that like Duolingo, learning a language, preparing myself to start to understand the words. And so there was definitely logistics along the trip that we had to work through. And, that's just part of most daily life, right? And then there's the third gear, which is that social connection. Just engaging with the team, having conversations, fostering bonds, building with the community, playing with children. We were at an orphanage, so that was a great experience. And so we had opportunities to meet with other people. We had about 20, 25 people come down with us from the States to participate in this, and we worked with other groups down there as well. And so it was an opportunity for fellowship, times to, we had singing at times, we had times to eat together. So social connection was important as well. And I'm giving you a broad overview, I'll go a little deeper here, but I'm giving you this understanding of moving between these gears is important in your daily life. Second gear is that personal connection. It really is going deeper and getting to know somebody, not just on a surface level, socially, kind of, but really going in deeper, sharing reflections in times of, we had testimonies, people sharing their own personal journeys. And it was just very intentional time there where we were listening and connecting with one another. And also we needed time to recharge, downtime. Even in the midst of going over 4 days, we did find times where we could rest, find restorative time amongst that. And so moving between all these gears is challenging if you're not intentional about it. And you might get stuck in one of them that may be more natural for you than others. I think most people may fall into the task mode because it's kind of where we are in our busy lives. But maybe it's for you. It could be social connection. That's big for me. Some people really want to have that personal connection, but they need to make sure that they're working on those tasks or that deep work as well, or recharge. And so these are some of the things that are really important to be able to move from. And as I was explaining with a client today, we realize where we might get hung up. And sometimes we don't realize that unless we have some kind of mirror reflection. That's why I work with folks as a coach. A coach is there to ask you some questions and help you see yourself maybe more clearly than you haven't been able to see. You might be asleep or kind of starting to wake up to these things, but you're like, man, how many people have said, I wish I just, I didn't need to work as much. I missed out on these things. It's because they were in a gear that didn't really serve them well. And using this using this framework, the 5 gears, and I have a whole masterclass and I go through this with your voice order. So for those of you that have heard me talk about the voice order or being present oriented, you're typically more likely to be in your 4th gear tasking because you're like, I got to get these things done. Where if you're maybe more future oriented, like myself, you might get more into the planning side of things and kind of projecting forward naturally. Neither one is better than the other. It just you have to understand how you shift between those gears. And so when I say I live a life of design, here I am leaving on a Friday, which means I have to coordinate things with work and schedules and logistics, right? And I started planning and preparing that and also being gone. This happened to be on our holiday weekend here, Veterans Day. Thank you all veterans as well. While we were away. And so, being prepared for that was very important. And so I did that, but also when I was on the trip, I could be really I could move out of fifth gear because for the most part that was done, that was all prepared. And now I could start to shift into fourth gear, third gear, second gear, first gear, and I could move to those fairly fluidly. Yes, we were doing a lot of tasks. Well, I recognize in myself where I need to recharge. Where do I need to rest? Where do I need to step aside? And we recognize that too as a group. At the end of the day, for example, we would come together and share what were our kind of key takeaways. There was opportunities for social connection and also for a deeper personal connection. And I intentionally found times along the trip to go from social to deeper personal connection at times when it was appropriate, when there was the time and the space. And so I looked for those opportunities, and I seized the opportunity when it was there. Sometimes we can miss those if we're not being intentional. For example, I was talking to a client, and she recognized that she needed to have social time. She just hadn't had any. So she's like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to have dinner, I'm going to be with friends. And so sometimes it takes that intentionality, and we don't want to look up and say, I didn't have that phone call. I didn't spend that time with the loved one. I didn't go to that event, and I skipped out again because I just went to my natural task gear, for example. But when we take time each day and we think about the gears that we need, and you may or may not be in all 5 gears in a given day. Likely you're not. But you're probably going to be in several, 2, 3, 4 perhaps. And so what I want you to encourage you is to practice intentional transitions between your gears. For those of you who have never shifted gears, because you have to use a clutch to do that, it's called grinding the gears. And oftentimes when you're first learning how to drive a car, you grind the gears because you don't know how to let out the clutch smoothly and shift. And so it really is the art of shifting or transition is really important. Another book I have here by Brendan Burchard is one where we talks about transitions, and those are very important as well. So you need to be able to know how to move between the gears, and the more seamless you can do, the more peace your life is going to have, the more fulfillment, in my experience, you're going to have because you know how to maneuver that and essentially drive your life in a productive, effective way that others will notice. Others will notice. I will say, over this past weekend, particularly on Monday, where we were at a old folks' home, and I could practice going from social to being more present as the opportunity allowed, and I could move away from fourth gear or fifth gear and having a lot of things in my mind. And that was a true blessing. And you as a leader, whether you're doing this as an outreach or you're doing this with your team, the ability to shift and go from being, maybe task-oriented, boom, 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 and then being present with your team and joking and having a good time socially, or really listening to a team member is really vital to your success and theirs, quite honestly. And so when we practice this, and it does take practice, you will get better, and you'll start to recognize, you know what? This week I didn't have any recharge. And if you don't have that recharge, if you're out of balance or out of alignment, this is going to really affect your quality of life and, honestly, how you contribute to the quality of life of others. Oftentimes we don't even realize how out of alignment we are in our gears, and why do we have to fix that. For those of you that use chiropractor care like I do, we get out of alignment and we need to be realigned. It just naturally happens, right? You could be doing just daily life and you're going to get out of alignment, and sometimes we don't even know what alignment really looks like. What does that look like for you? Moving from your focused mode to your task mode, to your social mode, to your going deeper personal connection mode, to recharge, and even apologizing and correcting when you're off. What does that look like for you? Do you know? Could you tell very clearly, this is what my life of design is? Or are you kind of wondering? And if you're wondering, I want to encourage you to reach out. I'm happy to share resources with you. That's why I create this podcast. I can't solve all the problems on a podcast, like I said before, but I can certainly give you insights and start to point you in the right direction. That's what I lead from, is providing value and insight, and then come, see, try it out, and see if that's going to work for you. I want you to incorporate all of these really, honestly, daily as much as you can, at least understanding what gears you're in. Reflect on your own experience traveling. Were you able to naturally move between these gears, or were you in primarily one? And energetically, what was that like for you? Oftentimes, our natural gear, we get energized by that. However, at a certain point, you might run out of gas. And that was a conversation I had earlier today with someone where we're talking about they just ran out of gas. They were just going. And they actually do really well overall in that, but they ran out. They ran out of gas. And I don't want you to run out of gas. I want you to run the race well. I want you to come off successful in life, and where you can say, well done. You've lived a life well. Don't we all want to have that? So as you reflect on this podcast today, and I'm giving you just a real snippet here, I want to challenge you to look at the way you are in the gears you're at. And if you're struggling in these areas, as I have, as I work with others in especially different seasons of life, know that you have an advocate here in David Carr with Steward Your Business and the resources I have, both individuals and groups. And so there is no guilt, there's no shame. We all have our own journey, we all have our own challenges, but to have somebody else that you could speak with, learn, kind of peel back the layers, if you will, and help you craft the life that you truly desire. What do you really want? And how are you going to get there? Let's discover that together. Let's help you be that intelligent human leader. As you're leading yourself well, you're going to see the benefits, and they're kind of, it's as you're like taking this in and leading this yourself, you're going to start to see this in others. I had the benefit of having my son along with me. He's 15, almost 15 and a half here, and he got to see me be present. And it really touched me that he could see that, particularly as I talked to some of the older folks, and realized that I could move and be really present. And that's how I want to be with him as well. And I know I have to be intentional. This morning, after getting home late at night, last night, I knew I could jump into all the things I had missed over the last 4 days. Of course, whenever we take time away from the business, there's always things piling up. But my relationship with my wife was important to me. Like, I need to make sure we had coffee, we had time together, we had an opportunity to reconnect, hear where she's at, what's going on. I needed to be present there. And that was a choice I made. There was other things that came up on today, and I knew that my social gear could be filled later. As far as I needed to be in gear 2, I needed to be more intentional and present with my wife. And so all this to be said is that you can have that. You can live a life of true design. You can have these gears working for you and not against you. But oftentimes it takes a coach to help you along that journey. That's what a coach does. And they're a mechanism for you to invest in yourself. So if this resonates with you, you're hearing this today as you're listening to me on this, I appreciate your reviews. Leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, and share your insights. Where are you succeeding, perhaps, in these 5 gears, and where are you struggling? Are you staying in task mode? Are you maybe just mainly in focus mode, planning, or do you like just the social side, where you're meeting with people and you're enjoying that, but you're not getting other things done, or you're not really having a deep relationships, or not really recharging yourself? I have a whole 5 gears masterclass that I walk through, a deeper dive. Here's the videos and assessments that are all available to you, and would love to have you have access to those. Very accessible and reasonable to incorporate into your life and have success. And that's what we're about here, giving you the successful life, looking back and saying, well done, well done. I appreciate you guys joining me again on the podcast, and invite you to the next episode as I come out every week. Again, your listening ears are really a treasure, and I appreciate you spending the time here each week with me on the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. Until next time, take good care. Thanks, everybody.